2, 1. Welcome to another Britflix.com podcast. Today's guest produced the UK drama Orthodox, which we featured on Britflix in 2016 when I interviewed writer-director David Leon. She also produced Tell It to the Bees in 2018, the big screen adaptation of Fiona Shaw's novel of the same name. And in 2023, she produced the quirky comedy My Happy Ending, starring Andy McDowell, Sally Phillips and Miriam Margolis. Welcome to the show, Daisy Allsop.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
We are going to be talking about a documentary you produced called Otto Baxter, Not a Fucking Horror Story, which within that had a short film you produced called The Puppet Asylum as well. As well as that, you will be sharing 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Does that sound like what you've signed up for?
Yep, looking forward to it.
Brilliant. So, as a starting point, and before we get into any details then, what is Otto Baxter, Not a Fucking Horror Story?
Yeah, with hindsight, that's quite a long title, isn't it? I realise as every time I have to write it into an email, or you get like a 300-word biog, and I've taken up that many words just with one title, I regret it. So it's actually the only doc I've ever done, and I wasn't planning to make a documentary actually, but I was drawn into it, and I'm so proud of it, and it's one of my favourite things I've ever done, maybe my favourite. So I know, so Otto has got Down syndrome, Otto Baxter, and the documentary, Bruce Fletcher and Peter Beard, who are seasoned documentary makers, were friends with Otto. They had made a short documentary for Channel 4 with him years before, and they'd stayed in touch with him, and they'd actually ended up taking on a slightly more formal role as kind of his official advocates kind of going forward. And they wanted to make a doc with him that was something that, well, they spent a long time thinking about making something longer with him. And they also at the same time were thinking about how they could get to know him better, because they'd known him for many years, but they always kind of asked around together. You know, they'd play football, or they'd like talk about their top 10s, or they'd go for pizza, or they realize actually when they get to the nub of kind of what he's thinking or feeling, he wasn't forthcoming with talking about those things. And so they were thinking about ways that they could really get to that, you know, in the event that they might have to kind of really advocate for him, how they would really know what decisions he wanted to make and be sure that they weren't just planting things in his mind. Yeah. So Otto's obsessed with film, and horror film in particular. So they had an idea that they would help Otto to make a film as a way to really get inside his mind and make a documentary about that kind of cathartic process. So Otto wrote and directed a film called The Puppet Asylum, which is a horror comedy musical biopic set in Victorian London. And it's an allegory. It's about the birth of a grotesque monster baby whose horrified parents sell him to a freak show owner. And it's really about his, you know, having been given up for adoption when his parents found out he had Down syndrome. And in the film, he's rescued from the freak show owner by Lucy, who's his adoptive mother, who actually has 4 adopted sons, all with Down syndrome. So it's about his, you know, his fears for the future if there's a time without Lucy in his life. It's about how he feels about being given up, and it's about every authority figure that ever patronized him and talked down to him, all in the shape of this character called the Master, played by Paul Kay. So we had Mianna Buring playing his birth mother. We had Dexter Fletcher voicing this bizarre character who represents a childhood friend of his, and Adil Akhtar kind of narrating the story from beside the fireplace. So it's very sort of gothic, and it's very much is Otto's singular vision. And then the doc is really about both. It's about Bruce and Pete, who made the doc, but they're also in the doc because it's about their friendship, and it's about his, you know, his process of making the film. And it was made over several years, and really also about that creative process with him. Kind of he the way he goes into this story and kind of figuring out what it meant for him and helping to draw that out. So
you said this is your first documentary, and obviously 6 years is a length of time, and that can be the time it could take a script to screen. But obviously, when you're making a documentary, you're not starting with everything in place to shoot. You're shooting and developing ideas as you go. How did that process differ? How did you find that process as a producer?
We got some development money from the BFI early on, which was great and really important. We shot one scene from the film because we had to prove to ourselves and everyone that Otto could write and direct a film and what that process would look like. We had to learn. So I thought naively, having not made a doc and thinking that could be done relatively cheaply, that the world needs this film, so it will be easy to finance. So sort of launched myself into, taking this teaser out to the world, thinking, well, the teaser's brilliant. And the BFI funded the development, and of course the money's going to pour in philanthropic funds or whatever it may be. And we got somewhere with it. We sort of clawed our way towards about 300,000, and actually it was quite an expensive thing to make because we needed to make Otto's film within a film.
Yeah.
Even though the doc part really is just Bruce and Pete getting on and shooting. And I was mistaken. It was very difficult to pull it together, actually. But we ended up shelving it for a little while. Bruce and Pete were busy in docs, and we just didn't really know how to take it forward. And then I guess the landscape changed a little bit, and there was a bit more of a kind of acknowledgement that voices of learning disabled people, neurodivergent people were kind of important to be heard. And Sky, who have really interesting kind of bold docs commissioning department. So Bruce Story Films, who I co-produced it with, took it to Sky, and they just got it. And they were, they also knew Bruce and Pete as doc directors in the TV space, whereas when I was pitching them out to independent film financiers, they didn't automatically know and trust what they would do. So we had that Sky commissioners. And they just really put their faith in it, which was incredible. I was really confused as an indie producer because I'm used to scrabbling around for every bit of soft money I can get, and then the rest against the market, and then that's not enough. I didn't know how to cope with a single financier who paid for the whole film. It took me a minute to just adjust. To the fact that we could just make it.
So when you're making the film, now you've got a development background, and obviously, and you're also a writer as well in your own right. How did you resist putting kind of your own neurotypical ideas of story and filmmaking onto Otto, rather than letting Otto run with what he wanted to do, to really give him the place to do what only he could do?
Yes, that was a huge part of the learning curve, actually, because I've worked with many writers and directors over the years, and done a lot of script editing, and it's interesting how you get pulled into. I'm really obsessed with structure, and I feel like I read scripts with instinct, but you do end up kind of being pulled into certain elements of the formula. There's certain things you expect to see. I'm sort of thinking about the midpoint. You're wanting to know who your character is and what they want in the first 10% of the film, and it just retrain my brain to say what is just coming out of Otto's head and what does it mean. And actually, some of the things in the film, which were the things we thought made no sense when he first said it, actually turned out to be some of the most exciting things. So this character of the master kept coming back, and the way the film had developed in the first place, we didn't really understand who the master was, and he kept saying it, and it took a minute to go back. I think generally the process was Bruce and Pete spend time with Otto. He would come into a scene or a segment, often with a detail of costume, or what they're wearing, or something about the production design, or something about some scary moment that happens. And then he would grow out the scene from there. And they would come out with lots of bullet points. And he knew a lot of it, but he would tell it in a non-linear order. So then I'd get sent kind of the whole thing in bullet points, and I would then put it into final draft. But yes, I'm a fast typist, and I'm used to writing in final draft, and it's very tempting to just fill in the gaps with where my mind goes that I think would be the obvious thing to do. So I had to stop myself from doing that. And often I think Bruce and Pete kind of came out of a day and realized they'd filled in the gaps themselves. And actually there was something Otto kept saying that they'd ignored because it didn't make sense. And so they'd go back and say, what did you mean about this thing? And then he'd talk through it again and it would end up being something brilliant. So the character that Dexter Fletcher voices in the film is based on a friend that Otto had called Jamie, the kid who used to get him to do things like shout shit in the classroom or like throw snowballs at bus drivers and things like that. And he depicted him as it started as a kind of Jack in the Box, ventriloquist dummy type character who comes out of a trunk and has this long orange hair that Otto sort of finds the hair and follows the hair, and then he pops out, and he's hundreds of years old, and then he popped that up at another time in the film. If this was a film with kind of many execs, people questioning every bit of the script, they'd say, where does this guy sit in the science of this piece? Like, who is he? Where's he come from? And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because he's a brilliant character. He pops up when you need him, and he's just completely a product of Otto's mind. So it was exciting doing that. The other thing that is tricky is that, of course, normally when you write a short film, you're constrained by budget. So you might write, someone making their debut film might write something that's 3 people in one location.
Yeah.
But Otto decided to set in Victorian London with sort of stunts and many different locations, and which is not what you'd normally advise as a producer, but it was really important that we let Otto's mind roam where it pleased. So
you wouldn't want to curb his ambition, would you? I suppose, rather than as part of the process of making the documentary.
Exactly, we had to see where it would go. Thankfully, the Fire of London scene ended up getting cut, and also we were very relieved when he moved on from the levitation. But yeah, I think we learned a lot from that process, and I guess it made me think about. I mean, we want to do something else with Otto.
Yeah,
and it's a very low. I think what Otto needs is time and support, and the support has to come from people that know him very, very well.
Yeah,
to help him to and know how, in a way, how to kind of interpret and draw things out of him and share a sense of humor.
Yeah.
But it's a kind of, I guess with anybody neurodivergent or particularly with a learning disability, if they're to develop and author something, then with each person, it would be a bespoke process and time. So in terms of kind of applying for development money, for example, it's a different level really of kind of what is needed and the kind of support that's needed. So
not being sort of atypical as a filmmaker, can you tell me how you coped and then embraced with the post-lunch dance-offs that Otis would bring to the crew?
I've tried to bring the lunchtime disco into other shoots since, but it doesn't take off in quite the same way. You need someone with Otto's exuberance leading the dance move, but it definitely does shake everyone up a bit for the afternoon.
Having gone through this experience of making the documentary and the short film with Otto, it doesn't end there, does it? So what for you and the working relationship with him, what plans have you got next, if any at all?
Yeah, it was, I guess, important to us that it wasn't a one-off, that we didn't just help him to make a short so that we could make a documentary about it.
Yeah.
And it also just felt really exciting, kind of seeing Otto's worldview and seeing what kind of that could make a film that was surprising and different and just thoroughly enjoyable to watch. I mean, his sense of humor is brilliant, and he surprises at every turn. So it felt really important that we kind of continue on that journey with him. And I loved watching him as a director. He makes decisions, which is really a big part of being a director. He knows what he wants and he imparts it beautifully to, in a way that all his heads of department and actors understand what he wants. And I just thought that was really exciting to watch. So Otto's very clear what he wants to do next, bringing in his love of Christmas movies and his love of horror movies.
Okay.
he has got an idea called Satan Claus, which is a Christmas family noir romp. It's about a little known fact that Santa has a younger brother, a disgruntled younger brother called Satan Claus, who always felt that Christmas should have been his to run, and that, Santa's too big for his boots, and he's been sort of slowly plotting to ruin Christmas for centuries. Finally, he's got a bit of dirt on Santa, who's been stooping his assistant, Jessica Woods. And he sort of passes this brown envelope dossier over to Santa the day before Christmas at the big kind of all departments meeting. Mary Claus, Mrs. Claus, is the CEO of Santa Corp, and she doesn't know about this, but obviously it would be a massive PR disaster for Santa and Christmas generally if this were to get out. So he blackmails Santa on Christmas Eve as he's about to set off, and he blackmails him into ruining Christmas. So Santa sets off with this kind of dual purpose of both having to ruin Christmas and simultaneously save it. And he teams up with a young kind of street urchin who is always top of the naughty list and hates Christmas anyway. And who is then... she's supposed to help Satan Claus out with his dastardly plan. But so that is in development at the moment. Otto's ideas kind of range from the detail of things, Santa pissing in the snow, or
it's a strong image.
I can't remember all the one. Yeah, to the kind of grand climactic fight scene at the end where hundreds of shopping mall Santas have to team up to save the day. He's got possessed toys running amok. So kind of coming back to the budgetary considerations, This is something that is all very well when you're making a short, and there's always a way when you're making a short, and you can always get that money on screen and bring people into the world and get favors. But yes, Otto's vision of a Christmas film that has a sleigh flying through the night and special effects and all sorts. But we will cross that bridge when we come to it. At the moment, we are still very much at the phase of let's see where Otto's mind takes us.
Yeah.
We have steered him into a slightly more family-friendly version because Otto will always veer to the kind of smuttier end. But I think if you're going to make a Christmas film, it's got to be a family film. So we're sort of treading that line. I think if you think what we're using as a reference, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Okay.
As a kind of, where it pushes slightly the smut or the noir, pushes it to a point where, there's things that adults will understand, but go over
I got you.
heads. And yeah, we're just in the fun early stage of kind of really thrashing out that beat sheet. But what's interesting is that it's what it's about again with Otto. And I think for him, it's actually about how Christmas can be a bit shit. Like if you're, in his case, like his birth parents never sent him a Christmas present. But it's very much about sort of calling out the forced jollity of Christmas and saying, it's not great for everybody. So this kind of great battle of Santa Claus versus Satan Claus has to end in maybe a kind of acknowledgement that it's not all the kind of cheerful veneer. So yes, we shall see. But I really hope that we can get.
No, sounds fantastic. Well, look, thank you for sharing that little bit of an insight into Otto Baxter, Not a Fucking Horror Story, and the film that was made within the film, The Puppet Asylum, and now the new one, was that Satan Claus?
Satan Claus.
Indeed, good luck. And now we shall move seamlessly into 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. The rules of 3 films are simple. Daisy has given me 3 titles, which we'll do in the order that I was given them. And every time we hear this sound, Daisy, which you can hear okay at your end.
Yeah, it's stressful.
That'll mean the end of 5 minutes and we move on to the next film. First off the rank, Dances with Wolves, 1990, starring Kevin Costner, his directorial feature film debut as a lieutenant assigned to a remote Civil War outpost, and then starts questioning his purpose when he makes contact with neighbouring Sioux settlement. Fun facts about that film, thinking of production: to prevent any possible animal cruelty, he spent $250,000 on an animatronic buffalo to be used in the climactic buffalo hunt, and which is always handy when you've got a spare $250,000 to make for
debut.
that. Yeah. Yeah. And filmed during a drought, water had to be trucked in to the location to from a fill-up pond. So they didn't make that bit of it easy, did they?
No.
So tell us, how does this film come onto your? I mean, this was a world phenomenon, wasn't it? Dances with Wolves. Come on. So where do you first see this film?
I chose it as one of my not my first memory of going to the cinema, but one of my early memories of going to the cinema. And it was an event. And I think we did this a few times. I grew up in Wimbledon, but I think a few times. This film, I remember, Last of the Mohicans. I'm sure there were a few others where my dad took me up to Leicester Square to watch the film.
Oh, wow.
It felt like a kind of big event. So it was 1990. I would have been 12.
Okay.
So I think by then we would have done that a few times. But yeah, it felt like, big movie coming out. And it was 3 hours long, the original. They since released a director's cut at 4 hours.
Gee whiz.
So I don't know if a modern 12-year-old would connect really with that. I know it's slow. It's 45 minutes till you meet the wolf. I don't think he meets the Sioux Indians till the obviously Native Americans. I'm going on the language used in the film. Till over an hour in, the love interest even longer than that. But it feels really important, really, that kind of languid, slow pace, because you're sort of plunged into this experience that he had where he was sent on his own to this outpost. And what I loved about it was just the epic, sweeping cinema vista. And obviously, cinema can be lots of things. I feel like it's anything that really uses the different tools at your disposal to get inside the emotion or inside the character. And you could use their camera in ways where you're suffocatingly close, or it's a Safdie Brothers film and it's just always on the move. So it can be doing different things. But when you think cinema, the first thing you think of is widescreen, and I think it just does that beautifully. I connected to the horse personally. A lot was about the horse, this beautiful kind of American Mustang horse, Disco. And then when the horse dies, sorry, plot spoiler, but the horse dies near the end, and also the wolf dies. And that was my first experience that I remember of absolutely sobbing to my very core in the cinema. I think I remember somebody had to ask my dad to shush me because I was just racked with sobs. And I've never lost my love of deeply crying in films. I love it. Everybody says people want happy endings. I absolutely love a kind of devastating ending that leaves you totally wrung out. I'll take any opportunity to cry in the cinema. So, and animals dying are always that gets me more than anything. I was sort of thinking about how many humans die in that film, but it's the wolf and the horse that got me. But I thought his performance is brilliant. I loved that I thought the use of narration is really interesting. He's writing in a journal, and the way that he performs the reading out of the journal really feels kind of in character. It's not narrated like an orator. He reads the journal like you might read a journal out, kind of in slightly flat tones. That makes that feel really authentic. But after seeing it at the cinema, I watched it many times again at home, and I think that I loved the texture. Every side character had something to offer. That opening scene just after he's that incredible rider.
So how was that? Was that 5 minutes short or long for you?
That was very short. I think your clock runs fast.
Right then, moving swiftly along to choice number 2. We have, after directing Piranha 2 The Spawning, this is the film that really put James Cameron on the path to becoming, I guess, the A-list of A-list writer-directors with what starts out, almost like modest beginnings with the Terminator from 1984. starring Arnie Schwarzenegger, which I think as well, it kind of made him the blockbuster superstar he became. I mean, a cyborg assassin from the future attempts to find and kill a young woman who is destined to give birth to a warrior who would lead the resistance. I mean, it's a great sci-fi setup. Fun fact, Arnie Schwarzenegger tried to avoid Linda Hamilton and Michael Biehn as much as possible, since he was the Terminator and he didn't want to make any formal connections with them as people outside of the film. So Arnie does method, which is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
And one afternoon during a break in filming, he went into a restaurant in downtown LA to get lunch, forgetting he was still in missing eye, exposed jawbone, and burned flesh makeup, which must have been a bit of a shock for some of the people.
Did he forget?
Did he forget? I don't know. So where does this film fit? If you were 12 going to the cinema in 1990, then you're not seeing this at the cinema, are you? So how does this film come onto your agenda?
When it came on TV. So my dad is a cinephile. He used to record films off the TV, meticulously. I mean, I think he would usually even wait and press pause on the ad breaks. So we had in our hallway, he'd made these bespoke shaped shelves, which ran the whole length of the downstairs hall and had with printed out spines, alphabetized films. That is
pretty organized.
I would know the names of directors. So I think I watched this probably pretty soon after it came on TV. I mean, what a movie. I don't even know how many times I watched this film. I think I knew the words, much of the dialogue inside out. It's a perfect structure. I think it's actually quite a simple story, but just so well told, so well laid out. And I think it's rare to get a film which is such a gripping, kind of brilliant, gripping action thriller, but with a love story that you genuinely buy into. I think it was the love story that really got it for me. I think Kyle Reese was my first love. I was just absolute the way that it came full circle at the end. I think it's so brilliantly told. But I think the dialogue was something that really elevated it for me. So many fantastic lines. Everything from like the answering machine message that she does at the beginning to that great line about the short time we spent together. We loved a lifetime's worth. I just love this film. I still can hear the score in my head, which I don't think I could say of many movie scores.
Okay.
But the way that helped to propel the film forward. The look and the feel. Linda Hamilton's so cool. That's sort of see her driving off at the end in her sunglasses, kind of changed by the experience. I think so many films have gone since that make a lot of these kind of tropes feel familiar, but I think at the time it felt like it was really inventing a new way of telling a story. Yeah,
because I mean, obviously he's this antagonist lead, and obviously he's the name of the title of the film, but really he's this disruptor to someone else's story, isn't he? And I think if I'm right, I mean, it's a while since I've seen it, but we start with him, don't we? This person arriving into our what we don't know what he is, but obviously he's arriving into our present day, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. I met Arnie once, actually. Remember, way back in the early 2000s of Cannes, MTV used to have these big parties, and they did one for the Terminator 2, and he came sweeping through, kind of shaking everybody's hands in the party, and he just swept past and grabbed what felt like my tiny little hand in his and shook my hand and looked up at him. And I thought, yeah, no wonder he got that role. What else can I tell you about it?
Out of interest, what did you think? What did you think of that? I mean, from liking that film so much, and then the change over to where he becomes the good guy in the sequel.
Yeah, it's interesting because actually, it's longer since I saw the sequel, but it was a seamless, because I think that was a big part of the marketing. How are we going to make that switch?
We'll never know. Right then, one of my personal favourites is your next choice. 1993, True Romance, starring Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette, and a film-stealing sequence from Gary Oldman as the pimp gangster Drexel Spivey, directed by Tony Scott, but I think more importantly for a generation of film lovers, written by Tarantino and Roger Avery, who would soon be bigger names for what they did with Pulp Fiction a year or so later. Fun fact about this, the American Film Institute asked Gary Oldman what were his favourite roles back in 2011, and he chose Lee Harvey Oswald in JFK and Drexel Spivey, even though, it's such a tiny role.
Wow.
Brad Pitt apparently found the hat he is wearing in the kitchen sequence on the boardwalk at Venice Beach, and he took it home, washed it, and wore it for the film. And all of his lines are apparently improvised in that film. I mean, it makes sense given the broken biscuits he comes out with, but it was. But tell us, where do you see this? Where do you see this first?
Firstly, I've just realised to my horror that I've chosen 3 American movies, and I am a British indie film producer. So
you're not the first, so don't be. We were enveloped. We are saturated in it, so it's not unusual.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess those films that made me inspired to work in film. True Romance is officially, I've always cited it as the film that made me want to work in film.
Okay.
And it came out in 93, but I didn't discover it in 93. It was later. I think I had loved Reservoir Dogs, and I remember going to see Reservoir Dogs. It was on like at 11 o'clock at night at my local cinema, and I went like 3 or 4 times. So I worked out that he had written it, and I think I was actually at university, and I am always slow on the uptake, but I was really excited that VHSs suddenly were really cheap. So I had a TV and a video in my room at uni, and I started buying loads and loads of it, like making a huge video collection, because they were 3 for £10. Obviously, because it was a soon-to-be defunct format. But anyway, I was kind of slow to figure that out. But I remember True Romance being one of those videos that I bought when I was at uni, and spending a lot of time rewatching films in the way that only students have got time to do.
Indeed.
And I just found it so exciting. I think it was the script in the first instance that made me kind of dare to wonder if I could work in film and kind of get my hands on scripts and like be part of that process.
Yeah.
I mean, the dialogue is brilliant. There are so many quotable lines in it. I used to watch it over and over again, and just everything from like who or what is a Drexel to the thing about getting a piece of pie to talk about the movie. But I feel like it kind of uses the tools of cinema, the way it sets the tone, the way it sets scenes up in places that find an atmosphere. So that scene on the balcony with the neon in the background where she kind of sits after their first night together, and the Drexel scene is fantastic. There's a scene where he meets the Hollywood exec, and it's on a roller coaster, which obviously, I mean, that'd be the first thing to go when you're trying to crunch a budget these days. It's not necessary to move the story forward that scene takes place on a roller coaster, but it just kind of upped the stakes in a brilliant way. I really, in the way that they handled the scene where she's James Gandolfini has come to kill her, and she's just this scrappy, she just won't let it go, and it ends up in her kind of crying, covered in blood on the floor, holding that corkscrew, crying, and you just think, how's she going to find her way out of this? But I felt like every scene was kind of approached in this imaginative way that felt different and elevated. Actually, having watched it relatively recently again, I was disappointed to find it's not something I noticed when I first watched it, but it is absolutely full of casual racism to the point where I wanted to introduce it to my kids, but I just thought, I mean, it's like sort of all the way through the film. That's the classic Sicilian story scene. Dennis Hopper.
Yeah.
The whole premise of that scene.
Finish your thought. Please finish your thought. Go on.
Just the whole premise of that scene, he's so audacious. He knows it's going to die. He wants it to happen quickly. The whole premise of the scene is what an insult it would be to have more blood. And that wasn't kind of questioned. It's, it's very much, I'm not sure it stood the test of time, disappointingly. But anyway, it remains in my heart just because the film's so cool.
Well, look, that brings us to the end of 3 films that have impacted everything in your adult life. Thank you for sharing those stories.
It's a pleasure. It was good to, it was nice to think back on memories of kind of first being inspired by those films.
Indeed. And thank you for giving us that insight into Otto Baxter, not another fucking horror story. And the Puppet Asylum and what you've got planned for the future with him. So good luck with that. And it just gives me to say thank you very much for your time on the Britflix podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
Hello, travellers. Do you enjoy dark fantasy? Fancy some duets? Or maybe you're just in search of a long-form D&D campaign. Something to drown in when you're bored. Aimer Ace and Niles Wilhelm here on behalf of the Wayward Inquisition to let you know that they are your destination. Filled to the brim with all the glorious stories that you've been looking for, the Wayward Inquisition brings content that will have you wondering just what sorcery do these jesters possess. Give them a try. It's no skin off your bone. Unless Tyrell's involved, then it might be, but either way, go give them a listen. I promise you won't regret it.